Hello and welcome to EU Insights. Today we want to talk about a threat to the very fabric of our society, a crisis that has grown substantially over the last decade and is showing no signs of letting up. The crisis of affordable housing. House prices have risen by more than 60% and average rents by around 20% in the last 10 years across Europe. A lot more than household income has. At the same time, much needed new housing is not being built at the needed rate, mainly due to high construction costs and shortages of skilled labour. It's a perfect storm, creating anxiety and even desperation among many citizens and a potential political time bomb. The good news is the institutions of the European Union have woken up to it and have vowed to address and overcome the crisis. Our guest today is Dan Jørgensen, the first ever European Commissioner with a specific brief of housing. In December, he presented the first ever European Affordable Housing Plan. Welcome to EU Insights, Commissioner, and thank you for hosting us here in the Berlaymont building in Brussels, the beating heart of the EU's executive. Now, you have extensive experience in European politics, having been a member of the European Parliament for almost 10 years, from 2004, as well as national and international politics as a former Danish cabinet minister, notably for energy and climate, and having played important roles in the recent annual UN climate conferences, better known as COP. Your portfolio as Commissioner also includes energy, so that's familiar ground. But housing is perhaps not, nor is it familiar ground for the EU, not being a traditional competence for Brussels. So what's your approach here? Where do you think the EU can make a difference?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that this is really a crisis. And we're dealing with some of the most basic values that we have in Europe, which is the right to have your basic needs met. So roof over your head, gives a base in your life, and if you don't have it, a lot of other things will not be possible in your life. So it's a problem for the individuals that are hurt by the crisis, but it's also a problem for our societies. It hurts our economies. It's not good for the labor market. It's not good for mobility. It's not good for the education of our people. So for all of those reasons, we really do need to act. I also believe that if we don't, as policymakers, take this serious, then there's a risk that populism might rise in Europe even more than it's already doing, because populists will exploit a social crisis like this. So for political reasons also, it's important that we act. But first and foremost, it's about meeting the, I would almost say, demands of people, because they're legitimate, because this is a real crisis.
Yeah, but what can you do? I mean,
yeah, so there's many things we can do. It's also very clear that this is an area where the competences are shared. So yes, a lot needs to be done on local level, on national level, but a lot can also be done on European level. Let me give you a few examples.
Yes, please.
One is, to a large extent, this is also a problem that reflects that there's not a balance between supply and demand. When that happens, then of course the prices go up. So we need to work harder on having more houses constructed. We also need to exploit the many empty houses that are there today. So renovation, using buildings for other purposes than they're used today. We have some cities in Europe that has huge housing crisis, but has 20% of their buildings not occupied, either because they're not fit for living in, not fit for being dwellings, or because for political reasons, countries have chosen not to regulate that.
Or they're perhaps subjects of speculation.
Yes, so, but that's actually what I meant. I was just trying to be a little bit polite, saying for political reasons, yeah, countries have chosen not to do this. It can be that you allow second homes, third homes, fourth homes. It can be that you allow investors to simply buy apartments, buildings, and just have them as an object for speculation, not having anybody live there. The country that I know best, Denmark, where I'm from, we have regulation to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay. So that in most places in Denmark, you're not allowed to own a house unless somebody lives there. You don't have to live there yourself. You can rent it out, but you cannot just have empty houses all over.
Yeah.
And that, with some exceptions, but that is one way of dealing with the problem. So the whole question of making sure that there is more houses, more apartments, more houses for people to rent or buy is of course important. Then there's the speculation that you talked about, financialization of the sector, you could say. There's no doubt in my mind that this is going on. Houses, buildings have become a commodity, so you can invest in that like you can invest in gold or something else.
Yeah. And a more attractive one, I guess, with
many
times,
places
at the moment.
It is. So we have very many examples of cities where there's huge money to be made by investing in houses. And this is, of course, about striking a balance as policymakers, because on one hand, we do want it to be attractive to invest in building and constructing new houses or renovating old ones. But at the same time, if this is just a commodity and at the bottom line is most important, then how do we make sure that the right decisions for society as a whole is made, right?
Yeah.
So first step is that we need a better understanding of what's going on. We need an overview of where the problems are, what the problems are. And that's why in the plan that we have presented, we state that we're now ready to take that analytical approach, that we're now ready to acknowledge that this might be a big problem for Europe, and therefore we are now in the middle of analyzing the situation. And next step, it's too early to say what it will be, but I will definitely also encourage European Parliament, national parliaments, governments already now to start taking this discussion, because there's no need to hide that this is a little bit of a controversial discussion. I've had it with the European Parliament. Left side of the House are very keen to do something. They want to regulate. Right side of the House say, well, maybe the problem is not that big, and if it is, probably it's up to the market to solve it. So where do we find solutions for that is too early to say.
Well, the European Parliament has, of course, already established a special committee on the housing crisis, and in an earlier program of EU Insights, I had an opportunity to talk to three of them, three lawmakers who are in that commission and a committee. And I must say, I have to tell you now, they sang your praises. They were very happy. Okay, they were centre left and centre right, so. But they were very, I mean, they sort of, he listens to us, he listens what we have to tell him. And they're very, very keen, of course, at the same time. They are very, very keenly aware, seem to be keenly aware also of the magnitude of the crisis. MEPs came from Ireland, the Netherlands and Germany. And of course, all three places are affected by that crisis in a different way. Perhaps we can talk about that a little later, about different ways. But in any way, they were very, very happy with your approach. Are you happy with their approach?
Yes, and I want to just, well, first of all, that's very kind of them and kind of you to say it, but I think we do need to listen to the European Parliament, and we do need to listen to national lawmakers and even local lawmakers and decision makers, because they are the ones that see the problems where they are. And I think for many, certainly for me, the last European Parliament election was a wake-up call, because I've been engaged with European politics all of my adult life, and I've been to, I don't think I'm exaggerating if I say thousands of meetings on EU policy. I'm sure that is, the numbers are extremely high. And the 10 years I was member of the European Parliament, I don't remember once getting a question about housing from the public. Not once. Yeah. Now,
that seemed to really have exploded once you left the parliament.
No, but now you cannot go to a meeting without getting. Even when I go to capitals and meet with prime ministers, I also have energy as a very important part of my portfolio. They all want to talk about housing because it's on top of the agenda. And the European Parliament election was really a wake-up call for many, because it was the most important topic discussed in many member states. So, first of all, the substance is there, the problem is there. When you look at the numbers, it's very clear. Second, our citizens also expect us to act. And thirdly, European Parliament, national parliaments, they are eager to do more. That's also why I think that there's expectations towards us in the European Commission, because normally to be honest, I think there's also been a little bit of an opposition to the EU taking more competencies upon our shoulders on this. So had this been 10 years ago and there was a new commissioner saying, I want to do this and that, probably there would have been pushback. Yeah. Now it's the opposite. Now they're pulling me almost to do more. So I think in that sense, we are at a good starting point. It's not enough, though. We need to show real action. Maybe I can give you a few examples. We've talked about some of the more meta stuff and the analysis and where we've started a process that will not show results tomorrow, but that will help in time. But we also need things that work. Exactly. We need things that work also on a shorter term. One very specific problem is short-term rentals. So again, this is a balance because I'm not. Some people expected me to propose to ban short-term rentals. That has never been my intention because I actually do think it's a good idea. I think it's good that we have tourism in Europe and that we can travel and visit each other. And I know that there's many families that are actually able to stay in the house that they are because they can make some extra money renting it out sometimes.
When they're not there.
And students and others. So it's a good idea. Problem is, in many cities, it's grown to an extent where it crowds out normal housing. It crowds out normal people from their homes. And it becomes sort of a business model. So you buy whole buildings and then you basically just have... It's just another way of having a hotel, really, without all of the rules, right?
That's right.
That will not stand. Yeah. We need to do something. On the other hand, we also need to realize that probably one solution will not fit all. So we're working on the Commission, I'm working with good colleagues on this, to find a way where we can say, okay, if we defined an area in a city or a country as a stressed area, an area where this is causing a problem, then within that area, if you are fulfilling these criteria, then there's a list of things that you can then do. And today, unfortunately, that's not always the case because there's also internal market rules that prevents member states from taking action. So I want to create a list of things that you can do in order to make sure that local lawmakers and national lawmakers are actually able to solve this problem the way that they see fit.
I mean, a lot of we talk sometimes also about, sort of representatives of the industries also when it comes to building. Sorry. And they then often say, but, it's all good, well and good, but then the other regulation, we have this regulation, making it more expensive now for us to build and so on. Nothing to do with you directly, but with other perhaps departments. So, So regarding the short-term rentals, of course, we are setting up some new rules. So is it bureaucracy? Well, you could say that, but you could also turn it around and say, well, no, this is actually making a level playing field. This is actually making the rules clear. This is giving instruments. And is that what this governments are asking for on EU level? Because I know that some, of course, Barcelona and so on, have, of course, acted already on that, and they can, I guess, on local level if they need to.
I think yes, there has been a push for us to do something. On the other hand, there's also been some concern that we would just impose a one-size-fits-all solution. But I will say that we'll see when we put forward the legislative proposal later this year. But I am quite optimistic that we've found the right balance. Again, as with everything we do, is on all issues actually in the EU, but I would say specifically and especially on this issue, it needs to be balanced because we don't want to overstep our competencies. There's a lot of social dimensions in housing policy. Social policy traditionally is something that you take care of nationally. I think most lawmakers, I would even go so far as to say most citizens, I might be wrong, but my guess is that most people don't really care that much where the decision is made, if it's a good decision, right? No, but I'm of course joking, but I do think there's some truth to it, because if you ask people, is this something that the EU should solve? Probably many of them would intuitively say, no, that would be my local government or national government. On the other hand, if you ask them, so the EU does actually have a solution, do you want it?
Yeah.
Probably they will say yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's quite interesting dynamic there, because it's not. I don't think it's self-evident.
No.
I mean, any city who's under siege from Airbnb, or where that sort of as a business model has encroached, can do something. But maybe some want to have, it's not only us, it's also Brussels.
Yeah, and also right now, unfortunately, EU rules are actually preventing some of the cities doing what they want.
All right.
Because, of course, the companies that are the providers of the platforms, the services for short-term rentals, they are also, of course, subject to EU law. And they will say, okay, well, this is a service that we sell and we do it cross borders. You cannot just...
That's right.
So we need to make sure that it is actually possible within the proportions, and all of that needs to be right. But if you fulfill certain criteria, then it's actually possible for cities to do these things. So that's number one. Number two, there's also a lot of sharing best practices here. There's also a lot of just drawing attention to what you can actually do. I mean, sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's maybe a little bit more complicated, but some cities have actually shown that by being a bit creative, we found this solution. And that's also an important part of my work to find out where that will work. Another example of that is homelessness. So this is a huge problem. We need to deal with it. It's in a way, I would say it's actually embarrassing that we in this rich, wealthy part of the world, compared to many other places on this planet, that we still have people that live on the street.
It's getting more rather than less, is it?
It's actually increasing many places because of some of the dynamics that we talked about. The more expensive it gets. By the way, this is not only the expenses related to you actually living in a house, whether it's a mortgage or it's rent. It's also energy prices. Another part of my portfolio, because 47 million people last year had problems adequately heating their homes. So people are under pressure, and then they might end up on the street. It breaks my heart to think about this. Even children, we have homeless, hundreds of thousands in Europe. Huge problem. So again, some of this is not only about building more houses, renovating more houses, all of these things. It's also about social policy. So Finland, for instance, they have a principle called housing first, which is a mixture of different policies. The social policies is certainly a part of this. And it's actually worked quite well. And I would love for that model to be used in more countries. So we're trying to do our best to facilitate that actually happens. And I see a lot of appetite from ministers to work like this, where they don't feel forced from Brussels to do what we, the bureaucrats of Brussels, tell them, but they actually see us as somebody that is facilitating, somebody that is providing good ideas, sometimes funding to do things that they probably wouldn't have done.
No, basically that's also came out a little bit on the discussion with the MEPs. They were arguing some countries don't need money. Dutch MEPs said, we have enough money. We just want a lot of regulations slashed so that we can build. We need room. It was maybe a bit drastic on that, but it's basically in other countries. What they basically need is money. But
I will say that I do think that the MEPs that are saying that there's too much red tape, too much bureaucracy, that they are right. I mean, having been a lawmaker in different capacities for many, many years now, first member of the European Parliament, then minister, and thereby a member of the Council, and now in the Commission, I totally recognize that most of the rules are there for a reason. It made good sense when you made them, and by the way, it's also often compromises. They complement each other, their rules, because you need this, and then to find the balance, you need this, and then it becomes very complicated, and then a new problem arises, and you build on top of what you already have. So it's very easy to build a huge bureaucracy. It's up to us then to once in a while step back, analyze, look at it. Okay, has some of it become obsolete? Is some of it there for a good reason, and it might even work? But if you look at the proportions between how difficult it makes lives for businesses or people compared to how well it works, then maybe let's get rid of it. So a part of what we're doing now is also going through all of the legislation, which is a lot in many different areas that affects housing. So it's environment legislation. I started my career as an environment politician. I'm still very, very engaged in fighting climate change and all that. So I definitely think this is important. But maybe sometimes the proportions are not right. Maybe sometimes you have to fulfill 100 criteria where you could actually have just as efficient protection of nature with 10 criteria. No. So let's see if we can make this a little bit easier. Let's see if we can make this also in a way where we listen more to the actual people out there on the ground that are dealing with these issues every day. So the people in the construction sector that every day has to deal with delays, and because you have to send in a form and then you have to wait a few months to get the answer, and then you wrote something wrong on page 13 and then you send it back. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there's also some truth to it. That needs to change because we don't have a lot of time. This is a pressing issue and we need solutions that will work fast.
Commissioner, that's all we have time for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching.